My name is Tanisha Coleman, and I was 31 years old the night my mother looked me dead in my eyes and told me I didn't belong in the house I paid for. It was a Tuesday in March, cold enough that the heater in the living room of the house on Maple Grove Avenue in Southfield, Michigan, was running full blast. I remember the smell of her burnt cornbread still hanging in the kitchen air, and I remember the way she wiped her hands on her apron before she said it, like she was wiping away any responsibility for the words about to come out of her mouth. Before we continue, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now, let's continue. Tanisha, baby, I think it's time you start thinking about your own place. You're 31. You're too broke to keep staying in this house living off me. I laughed. I actually laughed because for a second I thought she was joking. My mother, Carletha Coleman, 58 years old, had not worked a steady job in 6 years. Not since her hours got cut at the hospital where she did billing. Not since I started covering the mortgage, the light bill, the water bill, and yes, even her hair appointments every 2 weeks at Divine Styles on 8 Mile. Mama, I pay the mortgage, I said, still halfway smiling, because my brain hadn't caught up to what was happening. This is my house, Tanisha. I don't care what you pay. My name been on this house since 1994. That's when the smile fell off my face like a mask sliding to the floor, because that wasn't true, not anymore, and she knew it. 3 years earlier, when Mama's name got dragged through a bankruptcy after my stepfather Rodney's failed barbershop went under, the bank came for the house. I was the one who sat in the credit union on Northwestern Highway with a loan officer named Mr. Patterson, refinancing that house under my own name to save it from foreclosure. I was the one who signed every document. I was the one whose credit score took the hit. The deed, the actual, legal deed, had my name on it. Only my name. I hadn't told her that part yet. I'd been protecting her pride. But when she stood in that kitchen and called me broke, called me a burden, in a house I was drowning myself in debt to protect, something in me went quiet and cold. Say that again, I whispered. She crossed her arms. You heard me. Too broke, too grown, too comfortable. Time to go. I nodded slowly, grabbed my coat off the hook by the door, and walked out into the cold Michigan night without another word. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. To understand why I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't beg my own mother to take it back, you have to understand who raised me. Carletha Coleman was not always cruel. When I was 8 years old and my father, Marcus Coleman, walked out on us for a woman named Deborah from his job at the Chrysler plant, it was my mother who held our family of 2 together with nothing but grit and government cheese. She worked doubles at Beaumont Hospital, came home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, and still found the strength to braid my hair every Sunday night while gospel music played low on the radio. I loved her fiercely. I still do, if I'm honest, even after everything. But somewhere between my father leaving and Rodney entering our lives when I was 17, my mother changed. Rodney Briggs was charming, the kind of man who could sell ice to an Eskimo, and my mother fell hard. He moved into our house within 8 months of meeting her. By the time I was 20, he had convinced my mother to co-sign 2 business loans for a barber shop that never turned a profit. I watched my mother go from a woman who clipped to coupons to save $5 to a woman who spent her last dollar defending a man who never once put her name on anything he owned. When Rodney's shop finally collapsed in 2021, so did what was left of my mother's credit. The house, the only stable thing I'd ever known, was 3 months from foreclosure notices taped to our front door. I was 28 then, working as a claims adjuster making decent money, engaged to a good man named Andre Whitfield who kept telling me, "Tanisha, that's not your responsibility to fix." But I did it anyway. I refinanced. I signed. I saved the house. Rodney left 8 months later, the same way my father had. Quiet, no note, no goodbye. And somehow, in my mother's mind, I became the villain of that story, instead of the daughter who cleaned up the wreckage. That night in my car outside the house, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I finally let myself remember something my grandmother, Big Mama Ruth, used to say before she passed. "Baby, some people will only respect the hand that feeds them once it stops feeding them." I started the engine. I had a decision to make. I didn't go far that night. I checked into a comfort inn off Telegraph Road, paid $89 for a room with a flickering lamp and thin walls, and sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open. I pulled up the Oakland County Register of Deeds website. There it was, plain as day, filed in 2021, grantee, Tanisha R. Coleman, sole owner. My mother's name wasn't on that document, hadn't been for 3 years. I sat there staring at the screen until 2 a.m., my chest tight with a mixture of grief and fury I didn't have words for yet. I thought about calling my best friend, Linda Wright, who'd been telling me for 2 years that I was pouring water into a cup with a hole in the bottom. I thought about calling Andre, my fiancé, who I'd broken up with 18 months earlier, partly because he refused to keep watching me bankrupt myself for a house that wasn't legally even benefiting me emotionally anymore. Instead, I called my Aunt Barbara, my mother's older sister, who lived 2 hours away in Toledo. She said, "What to you?" Aunt Barbara's voice cracked through the phone, sharp with disbelief. "She said I'm too broke to stay, Auntie." In the house I saved, there was a long silence. "Tanisha, does your mother know that house is in your name?" "No, ma'am. I never told her. I didn't want her to feel." "Feel what? Grateful? Baby, you protected that woman's pride for 3 years, while she treated you like a tenant instead of the reason she still has a roof. That ends tonight." Aunt Barbara's words landed like a match to gasoline I didn't know I'd been soaking in for years. I hung up the phone and opened a new tab. I searched, "How to sell a house you own outright fast, Michigan." A cash home buying company called SwiftKey Home Solutions popped up first, promising closings in as little as 10 days. I stared at that number for a long time. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I thought about the way she'd wiped her hands on that apron like she was wiping me away. I pressed call. I want to be clear about something, because I know how this story sounds. I did not act out of spite in one reckless night. I gave my mother a chance, several actually. The morning after I called SwiftKey, I drove back to the house at 9 a.m. My mother was in the kitchen making grits like nothing had happened, like she hadn't put her own daughter out into a cold Michigan night with nowhere solid to sleep. "Morning," she said, not even looking up from the stove. "Mama, we need to talk, really talk." She sighed, the way she always did when she didn't want to hear something. "Tanisha, I don't want to fight." "I don't either. I want you to understand something. This house, it's not in your name anymore, Mama. It hasn't been since 2021. I refinanced it to save it from foreclosure. It's in my name, only mine." For the first time in years, I saw something flicker across my mother's face that looked like real fear. "That's not. Rodney said the loan was just to help with the payments, not to. Rodney doesn't know what he's talking about. And honestly, Mama, neither did you, because you never asked. You never once asked me how I saved this house. You just assumed it would always be here, and that I'd always be here holding it up, invisible, unappreciated, and now, apparently, unwelcome." She sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the grits forgotten and burning behind her. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you hurt me last night in a way I don't think you understand. You called me broke in the very house my broke self has been keeping afloat for 3 years. I need you to apologize. Really apologize. And I need us to have an honest conversation about what happens next, because I can't keep being disrespected in a place I legally own." My mother's jaw tightened, and instead of the apology I was owed, instead of the accountability I was reasonably, calmly asking for, she said the 6 words that sealed everything. "This is still my house, Tanisha." I stood up, grabbed my keys off the counter, and walked out for the second time in 12 hours. This time, I didn't feel sad. I felt clarity. What happened next, I didn't see coming, and it's the reason this story became so much bigger than a mother-daughter disagreement. 2 days after our kitchen confrontation, my cousin Karen called me in a panic. "Tan, your mama been calling everybody. She's telling people you're trying to put her out on the street. She called Pastor Whitmore at New Hope. She called your Auntie Faye. She's telling everybody you turned evil overnight." My stomach dropped. "Karen, I haven't done anything to that woman except pay her bills for 3 years. I know, but that's not even the worst part." "What do you mean?" Karen hesitated. "Tan," she called Rodney. My blood went cold. She called Rodney? For what? "She's trying to get him to come back, to help her fight for the house. She told him you tricked her into signing papers she didn't understand." I nearly dropped the phone. My mother, the same woman whose life fell apart because of Rodney Briggs's lies and broken promises, was now inviting that same man back into the picture to help her fight against the daughter who actually saved her from the mess he created. That night, I sat in my apartment, the one I'd been quietly renting for 6 months as a backup plan I never told anyone about, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every hair appointment I paid for, every mortgage payment, every time I skipped a vacation, skipped new clothes, skipped building my own credit further because I was too busy protecting hers. And I thought about the fact that instead of gratitude, instead of even basic respect, my mother's first instinct in conflict was to reach for the man who broke us in the first place and paint me, her actual protector, as the villain. That was the moral line. That was the moment sympathy in me curdled into something harder. I called Swift Key Home Solutions back the next morning and told them I was ready to move forward. Full appraisal, fast closing, no contingencies. The inspector came out that Thursday. The offer came in by Friday. $214,000 cash, as is, closing in 12 business days. I signed the paperwork on a Saturday morning in April, sitting in my car outside a Tim Hortons on 9 Mile Road, hands steady this time. I didn't tell my mother what I'd done, not yet. For 12 days, I let her keep living in that house, completely unaware that the walls around her were no longer promises, they were countdown clocks. I want to be honest about something. Those 12 days were the hardest of my life, not because I doubted my decision, but because some small, stubborn part of me kept hoping she'd call and say, "Tanisha, I was wrong. Come home. Let's fix this." She never called. Instead, I heard through my cousin Karen that my mother had started telling people around the neighborhood that I'd abandoned her, that I was selfish, that Tanisha always thought she was better than this family since she got that fancy insurance job. Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour days at Cincinnati Insurance's Michigan office, using my lunch breaks to sign closing documents electronically, using my evenings to quietly pack up the storage unit I'd rented for the handful of belongings I still had at the house: old photo albums, my late father's watch, my high school diploma. On day 9, Andre texted me for the first time in months. Word travels fast in tight-knit communities like ours. "Heard what's going on. You okay?" I stared at that message for 20 minutes before responding. "I will be," he replied. "You always put everybody first, Tanisha, even when they don't deserve it. I'm proud of you for finally putting yourself first." I cried for the first time since that night in the kitchen. Not sad tears, relief tears, the kind that come when someone finally sees you clearly. On day 11, my Aunt Barbara called with updates. My mother had apparently gone to a lawyer, attorney Michael Prescott, trying to explore her options regarding the house. The lawyer's response, according to Barbara, had been blunt. "Ma'am, if the deed is solely in your daughter's name and she's been the one paying the mortgage and taxes, you don't have legal standing here." My mother reportedly stormed out of that consultation office in tears. Part of me ached for her. A bigger part of me remembered the apron, the wiped hands, the 6 words, "This is still my house, Tanisha." Closing day was set for a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after the night she put me out. I woke up at 6 a.m. that Tuesday with a strange, steady calm settling over me, like the quiet after a storm finally breaks. The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at a title company office in Royal Oak. I dressed carefully that morning, a navy blazer, my hair freshly done, my back straight. I wanted to walk into that office as the woman I'd become, not the girl who'd been crying in a comfort inn 2 weeks earlier. At 9:47 a.m., as I sat in the title company's small conference room, reviewing the final settlement statement, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again and again. 6 missed calls by the time I finished signing. At 10:23 a.m., the title agent, a woman named Sherry Alderman, slid the final document across the table. "Congratulations, Ms. Coleman. The sale is complete. Funds will be wired to your account within 24 hours. I signed my name, Tanisha Coleman, for the very last time on a document tied to that house. $214,000, minus closing costs, and the remaining loan balance, meaning roughly $151,000 would land in my account by the next morning. I walked out of that building into the April sunlight and finally listened to my mother's voicemails. The first one was confused. "Tanisha, there's a man outside taking pictures of the house, measuring the yard. What is going on?" The second was angry. "Call me back right now." The third one broke my heart a little, even after everything. "Baby, please. I don't understand what's happening. Please call your mother back." The fourth, fifth, and sixth were just crying. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time before I finally called her back. "Tanisha, what have you done?" she screamed the second she picked up. "I sold the house, Mama," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It closed 20 minutes ago." The silence on the other end of that line was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. "You sold my house?" My mother's voice cracked through the phone, somewhere between fury and disbelief. "It was never your house, Mama. Not since 2021. I told you that in the kitchen 2 weeks ago. You had every chance to have an honest conversation with me. You chose to call Rodney instead. You chose to tell the whole neighborhood I abandoned you. You chose pride over honesty. Every single time. Where am I supposed to go?" she screamed. And here is where I had to dig deep and find a strength I didn't know I had, because a part of me, the 8-year-old girl who watched her mother hold their family together with nothing but grit, wanted to fold, wanted to say, "I'll fix it, Mama. I always fix it." But I thought about Big Mama Ruth's words. Some people only respect the hand that feeds them once it stops feeding them. I've arranged 60 days of temporary housing for you at the extended stay on Northwestern Highway, fully paid, along with $8,000 to help you get settled into a new apartment, I said. That's more than you're legally owed, and more than most people would offer after being told they're too broke to matter in their own family. So this is you punishing me. No, Mama, this is me finally choosing myself. She hung up on me. The fallout in the days that followed was ugly. My mother told anyone who'd listen that I'd put her out to sell drugs, an accusation so wild, so disconnected from reality, that even people loyal to her started raising eyebrows. Pastor Whitmore, the same man she'd called crying that first week, eventually called me directly. "Tanisha, I did some digging, baby. Talked to people at the credit union. I know the truth now. Your mother is hurting, but she was wrong to do you like that." I told her as much. Hearing a neutral, respected man in our community validate what I already knew in my bones meant more than I expected. Rodney, predictably, never showed up to help with anything beyond stirring drama over the phone. Once he realized there was no house left to fight over, no asset to attach himself to, he disappeared again, exactly like he had 3 years earlier. My mother was, in the end, alone with the consequences of her own choices. I won't pretend the months that followed were easy. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from watching a parent reveal exactly who they are, especially when who they are is not who you needed them to be. I grieved the mother I wished I'd had, the one who would have said, "Tanisha, thank you. I'm sorry. Let's figure this out together," even while accepting the mother I actually had. I used $60,000 of the proceeds as a down payment on a townhouse in Ferndale, close enough to my job, far enough from the chaos. I remember standing in my new empty living room the day I got the keys, sunlight pouring through windows that belonged to no one but me, and crying tears that finally felt like they belonged to relief instead of pain. My mother moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment off 9 Mile after her 60 days at the extended stay ran out. Aunt Barbara told me she eventually got a part-time job at a Kroger deli counter, her first steady work in over 6 years. We didn't speak for 4 months. The silence broke on my birthday in August when I received a card in the mail. Inside, in my mother's familiar cursive handwriting, it read, "Tanisha, I was wrong. I let pride and fear make me cruel to the one person who never stopped showing up for me. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I'm proud of the woman you've become, even though I played a part in pushing you to become her the hard way. Happy birthday, baby." I sat with that card for a long time. I didn't call her that day, but I didn't throw it away either. Real change, I've learned, isn't proven in a single card or a single apology. It's proven in patterns, over time, with actions that match the words. We've since started rebuilding something. Slow, cautious, honest. Monthly dinners at a Coney Island on Woodward Avenue, where we talk more like 2 grown women than mother and daughter, where boundaries are respected instead of assumed away. She's never asked me for money since. Not once. And that, more than any apology, told me she'd finally learned the lesson. It's been 14 months since the night my mother told me I was too broke to stay in a house I'd been carrying on my back for years. I'm sitting in my Ferndale townhouse as I write this, candle burning, a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside my laptop. I'm 32 now. I got a promotion at Cincinnati Insurance last spring, senior claims adjuster, a title and a salary I earned entirely on my own merit, in my own name, answering to no one's assumptions about what I owed them. Andre and I found our way back to each other, slower and steadier this time, both of us wiser about what healthy love requires. We're planning a small wedding for next spring, at a venue in Birmingham, Michigan. Nothing extravagant, just people who've earned a seat at that table. I think about that Comfort Inn room off Telegraph Road sometimes, $89 a night, flickering lamp, a girl staring at a deed with her name on it, trying to decide who she was going to become. I became someone who understands that love without boundaries isn't love. It's exploitation with a family photo taped over it. I became someone who learned that being needed and being respected are not the same thing, and that you can walk away from people who confuse the two, even people who share your blood. To anyone out there who has ever poured everything into a family member who only saw you as useful, not valuable, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to protect your own peace. You are allowed to enforce boundaries, even ones that come with hard, uncomfortable consequences for people you love. You are allowed to choose yourself. My mother and I are healing, slowly, honestly, on new terms, but even if we hadn't found our way back to each other, I would still say the same thing I told her on that phone call the day the house sold, the words that still settle something steady and unshakable in my chest whenever I remember them. This is me finally choosing myself. And I'd do it again. If you enjoyed this story, show your support by leaving a like, subscribing so you never miss a new upload, and telling me your favorite moment in the comments. See you in the next story.